A CEO single for 30 years, until she falls in love at first sight with a humble single dad janitor. Rain whispered against the windows of Harbor and Oak, a soft, steady percussion that blended with the low hum of late-night jazz. Glasses clinked, chairs scraped lightly across polished floors, the kind of sounds that wrapped a person in dim comfort unless that person was Nora Hayes. She sat alone in the corner booth where the air felt cooler and the conversations felt farther away. The leather beneath her held the faint scent of old whiskey and lemon peel. She inhaled quietly, letting the muted aroma settle her nerves after a brutal board meeting. Her heartbeat still carried the echo of raised voices and veiled judgments. "Happy birthday, Nora." She said it in her mind because no one else had. 40 years old, CEO of Hayes Capital. A national magazine recently called her the woman who doesn't blink. And yet here she was, blinking at the candle on her untouched dessert, the flame trembling as if embarrassed for her. A waiter passed the murmur of his steps soft against the hardwood. Somewhere behind the bar, someone laughed too loudly. Nora exhaled, slowly letting her fingers tap the edge of her glass. Nothing in her life had room for romance. 30 years of climbing meant 30 years of telling herself, later, later, later. But tonight, later felt unbearably hollow. Near the service hallway, Ethan Cole held his phone between his shoulder and ear while tying his apron. His hands smelled faintly of industrial soap, sharp, lemony familiar. "Sweetheart?" "I know," he murmured to the little girl on the line. His voice carried a tired warmth that slipped through the noise of the bar. "I wish I could read the story tonight." "Did Grandpa finish dinner with you?" A small voice replied, too soft to make out but tender enough that Nora's head lifted instinctively, tuned to the affection in it. "I'll be home by morning. We'll do pancakes, okay?" "Team Cole." Another tiny whisper. He chuckled softly. "Always?" Nora caught herself leaning closer, surprised by the sudden pinch in her chest. She didn't know this man yet. Something in his tone, gentle but worn, pulled at memories she kept locked tight, memories of wanting someone to speak to her with that same quiet devotion. Ethan ended the call, shoved his phone into his pocket, and headed out with a mop in hand. His shoes squeaked faintly on the wet floor he'd just cleaned. 2 worlds in one building, 1 corner booth holding a woman who controlled millions, and 1 mop bucket holding a man who scraped to make rent. And yet, the sound of loneliness echoed the same on both sides. A crash erupted near Nora's table, sharp enough that a few guests startled. A drunk patron had stumbled, sloshing a full glass of red wine across her lap. "Hey, someone clean this." "Now," he barked. The room shifted, chairs stilled, breath paused. Before the waiter could reach them, Ethan appeared kneeling beside her table towel, already in hand. The faint scent of detergent followed him, fresh and strangely comforting. "I'm so sorry, ma'am," he said, even though the mess wasn't his fault. His voice was steady, low, respectful. "Let me help." Nora shook her head lightly. "It's fine." "Really?" But when he looked up, checking her expression for any sign of distress, their eyes locked. For one suspended heartbeat, the bar dissolved into nothing but the sound of rain and her own pulse thudding in her ears. She didn't believe in first-sight moments. She didn't believe in anything that didn't come with data contracts or quarterly reports. So why did her chest tighten like she'd forgotten how to breathe? Ethan swallowed gently. "Are you okay?" His hands were rough, his nails short. A thin, worn wedding band hugged his finger, a ring too modest for a man so careful with it. Nora's gaze lingered there before she caught herself. "I'm fine," she whispered, although fine wasn't the word for the flutter she felt. He wiped the table with controlled motions, mindful not to touch her, mindful of boundaries. It was the kind of respect she rarely saw from men with far more money and far less humility. Before he could stand, the restaurant manager approached, heel taps, sharp breath clipped. "Cole," he snapped, "back to work. You don't chat with VIPs. Ethan stiffened but didn't argue. "Yes, sir." Nora's jaw clenched. Something inside her flared anger, maybe. or the unsettling urge to defend a man she'd known for less than a minute. "He handled the situation better than your entire staff," she said coolly. Conversations around them dipped. The manager blinked, startled. Nora stood, laying a neatly folded $100 bill on the table closer to Ethan than to the manager. "Thank you," she said, her voice pointed in its clarity. Ethan hesitated. The money wasn't just a tip, it was acknowledgement. And that seemed to confuse him more than anything else tonight. Nora walked toward the door coat draped over her arm. The rain outside grew louder, a rhythmic curtain swallowing the city. She stepped out into it, letting the night air cool her face. She had meetings tomorrow, deadlines, investors breathing down her neck. But all she could think about was the man kneeling on the restaurant floor, the softness in his voice when he spoke to his daughter, the way her heartbeat had tripped when he asked if she was okay. Why him? Why now? Her thoughts circled like restless birds as she reached the curb. Behind her, Ethan watched through the smudged glass of the restaurant door, unaware that the stranger he was looking at was the CEO of the tallest building he cleaned every night. He only knew one thing, something that pressed unexpectedly against his ribs. There was something different about her, and Nora, standing in the rain with her breath fogging the air, knew one thing too. She wanted to see him again. The morning after Harbor and Oak carried a different kind of weight, cleaner, sharper, the sort that hit Nora Hayes right behind the eyes before her first sip of caffeine. The elevator hummed as it carried her up the glass spine of Hayes Capital. Doors slid open with a soft sigh, and she stepped into the lobby of her floor, the quiet drone of keyboards, the faint whir of the espresso machine, a printer spitting out documents somewhere down the hall. Familiar sounds. Reliable sounds. Yet her heartbeat wasn't steady. It still carried an echo. Ethan's warm, "Are you okay?" and the way her breath had stumbled in reply. She straightened her blazer, hiding the hesitation in her chest, and walked toward her office. The glass walls around her reflected a woman in full command, composed, tailored, unreadable. But as she reached for the door handle, she caught herself thinking, "You didn't sleep because of a janitor." The thought unsettled her in a way board meetings never had. Her corner office greeted her with silence, deep, insulated, expensive silence. The kind that made the rest of the world feel far away. The kind that should have been comforting. The faint hum of the city floated through the glass distant sirens' construction drills blocks away, a passing ferry horn over Lake Union. She usually filtered these things out. Today, every sound seemed to remind her of the night before. Nora set her bag down and pressed her fingertips to the cool surface of her desk. A whisper in her mind surfaced. You looked into his eyes too long. She pushed the thought away. The board meeting was scheduled for 9. She checked the time. 8:58. Perfect timing to lock herself back into the world she controlled. The boardroom came alive with shifting chairs and the rustling of paper. Daniel Whitmore, sharp suit, sharper ambition, leaned back as she entered, a smile grazing the edges of his voice. Morning, Nora. Rough night. You look tired. She ignored the jab. Let's begin. The discussion launched straight into numbers, profit margins, shareholder expectations, upcoming earnings calls. The click of Daniel's pen punctuated every one of his suggestions. But then the tone shifted. We need to talk about cost restructuring, he said, voice too casual, too confident. Cutting the remaining manufacturing team in Tacoma would increase quarterly profits by number. Nora's voice cut clean through the room. Those jobs are the reason we survived the 2018 downturn. I'm not gutting them. Shareholders, Daniel pressed, expect efficiency. And frankly, they're beginning to ask questions about your personal approach to leadership. A few heads turned, waiting for her reaction. He leaned forward with a low chuckle. A CEO with no public personal life is challenging for the press. Mystery is rarely good for the market. Maybe share something more human next time you speak to investors. His implication hung heavy in the air. More human, more appealing, less closed off. Nora folded her hands. If shareholders want gossip, they can subscribe to a tabloid. My job is results." Daniel didn't blink, just a suggestion. But she knew the tone. He wanted control, quiet, subtle, coercive control. And she'd seen that tone before many years ago from someone who had taken far too much from her when she was too young to recognize it. Her throat tightened. Her jaw locked. She held her ground. The meeting ended with strained nods. As Nora stepped out, her pulse beat a frustrated rhythm against her ribs. Back in her office, she opened her laptop but didn't type. Her therapist appointment reminder blinked on the screen, a weekly ritual she rarely skipped. She clicked. "Good morning." Nora Dr. Alvarez greeted, voice warm through the speakers. "You sound tense." "Hard day," she exhaled. "Bored politics. They imply I'm too closed off." "Are you?" the therapist asked gently. Nora stared out the window. Rain clouds drifted over the city. "Maybe. I don't know. I just spent decades avoiding mistakes." "What mistake are you afraid of repeating?" Silence stretched. She swallowed. "When I was 22, my boss, someone I trusted, blurred lines that should never be blurred. I didn't protest loud enough. I kept quiet because he held my future in his hands. And at some point I decided the safest choice was to never love anyone in this world. Or maybe, never love at all." Dr. Alvarez paused, letting the moment breathe. "Has anything or anyone challenged that choice recently?" Nora's thumbs tapped each other, a restless rhythm. The image rose, unbidden, a man kneeling at her table. Hands, steady voice, gentle eyes, honest. "I met someone," she admitted softly. "Someone from your world." She shook her head. "Not even close." "And how did it make you feel?" "Like I remembered something I didn't know I'd forgotten." Her therapist smiled with quiet understanding. "Maybe it's not about repeating mistakes. Maybe it's about trusting that you're no longer the person who could be controlled." Nora blinked, slowly absorbing that. But before she could answer, a knock sounded on her office door. "Sorry, I have to go." Downstairs, the lobby buzzed with mid-morning energy. People moved with purpose. Phones ringing, conversations floating in clipped professional tones. Nora stepped out of the elevator, then froze. There, near the reception desk, was Ethan Cole. His cart squeaked softly as he pushed it across the marble floor. He wore simple work gloves, a utility belt, the faint smell of cleaning solution trailing behind him. Her breath caught. He looked different in daylight, still humble, still grounded, but somehow steadier. As if he knew exactly who he was in a world that constantly tried to change him. Ethan glanced up, recognizing her. He offered a polite, almost shy nod. "Good morning, ma'am." An unexpected warmth shot down her spine. "Ma'am." The word was respectful, distant. Too distant. She cleared her throat. "Morning." For a moment, neither moved. The hum of the building filled the silence, distant chatter, a phone ringing, the rattle of the janitor's cartwheels, and then, for just a heartbeat, his eyes softened. A tiny shift. A silent echo of Harbor and Oak. Nora stepped aside to let someone pass, breaking the spell. When she looked back, Ethan was already turning down the hallway, heading toward the service elevator. Her chest tightened, not painfully, but unmistakably. As the elevator doors closed in front of her, the truth hit with the force of a whispered confession. It wasn't coincidence. It wasn't curiosity. It wasn't loneliness. She wanted to see him again. The next morning broke softly over the small apartment Ethan Cole called home. No skyline, no glass walls, just the gentle clatter of cheap cookware and the bright, unmistakable laughter of a 7-year-old girl. The kitchen smelled faintly of oatmeal and warm toast. The TV in the living room hummed with the sound of a Saturday morning cartoon voices, squeaking music looping. Ethan flipped a pancake, listening for the tiny gasp he knew was coming. "Daddy, it's a smiley face." Lila squealed as she swung her legs from the dining chair, bare feet tapping the seat. He grinned. "Team Cole runs on smiley face pancakes. House rule." She giggled, the kind of sound that softened every edge inside him. He set the plate in front of her and reached for her hair tie. The elastic snapped once against his fingers, and she winced with exaggerated drama. "Ow, gentle daddy." "I am gentle," he said as he gathered her curls carefully. "Your hair just has a personality of its own." Their ritual came next, simple, but sacred. Ethan, crouched to her level, held up his palm and whispered, "Team Cole." Lila pressed her tiny hand against his. Always, one word, their anchor, their promise. Watching her munch her pancakes, Ethan felt the small ache of guilt he carried daily. The dark circles under her eyes, the missed bedtime stories, the nights she fell asleep waiting for him. She deserves better, he thought. She deserves a dad who's home more than he's gone. But life didn't care what anyone deserved. Rent came every month, food every week, insurance every time he blinked. 2 jobs were survival, not choice. Later that morning, while Lila colored on the living room floor, Ethan pulled on his work boots. They creaked, faintly worn, reliable. His neighbor Tom leaned against the doorframe across the hall sipping cheap coffee. Double shifts again, Ethan nodded. Harbor and Oak, tonight. Tower cleaning after. Tom let out a low whistle. "You ever gonna breathe when bills take a vacation?" "I will," Ethan answered with a tired smile. But Tom's eyes softened. "You're doing good, man. Lila's a bright kid. She knows you're trying." Ethan nodded, swallowing the knot forming in his throat. Trying felt like the only thing he ever did. Never catching up. Always one step behind. By mid-afternoon, after school drop-off and a sprint through his first shift, Ethan found a quiet corner in the staff room of Hayes Capital's janitorial wing. He rubbed his temples, fatigue tugging at his eyelids. His coworker Mike, a man old enough to be his father with a voice like gravel, slid into the chair beside him. "You look like you fought a vacuum and lost," Mike grumbled. "Just tired," Ethan said. Lila's teacher called. "They want me to meet with the school counselor." Mike raised a gray eyebrow. "Why, kid's doing great. They said she's showing signs of anxiety. Because I'm not home enough." Mike leaned back, exhaling slowly. "You're killing yourself to give her stability. Don't let them make you feel like you're failing." But it wasn't that simple. Ethan felt the words settle heavy on his chest. When the world judged him, he could take it. But when they judged Lila's well-being, he felt stripped bare. The evening brought a quiet chill to the building. Lights dimmed, most floors emptied. The soothing hum of nighttime maintenance began vacuums, distant footsteps, the rustle of plastic trash bags. Ethan pushed his cart into the elevator, letting the soft click of each passing floor calm his racing mind. He needed peace. Just a moment. Instead, the elevator doors slid open to reveal Nora Hayes. She stepped in with that unmistakable air of composure, though her shoulders carried a sharper tension tonight. The doors closed, sealing the two of them into a small world of mechanical hums and recycled air. "Good evening," Ethan said softly. She startled slightly, then smiled. A real one, subtle but warm. "Hello." He tapped the mop handle lightly against the cart. "Didn't expect to see you again this soon." "Well," she replied, "this is my building." He snorted before he could stop himself. She blinked, surprised he'd let out something so unpolished in her presence. "Sorry," he said quickly. "Long day." She tilted her head. "Everything okay?" Her voice held something he didn't expect: genuine concern, not polite curiosity. Something in him loosened. "My daughter's school wants a meeting," he admitted. "They're worried she's anxious because I'm always gone." Nora's breath caught just a pinch of empathy. "That must be hard to hear." "It is," he said, staring at the elevator buttons. "I'm doing everything I can. Every shift, every hour. But sometimes it feels like it's never enough." He hadn't meant to say so much. He rarely told anyone this, but the silence around them felt safe, warm even. Nora nodded slowly. You're carrying more on your shoulders than most people ever have to. I just don't want Lila to think she's second in my life." His voice wavered. "She's everything." The elevator chimed. Nora stepped back, letting someone pass through the doors, but her gaze never left him. "I think she knows," she said gently. He swallowed hard, emotion tightening his chest. For a moment, the weight didn't feel quite so crushing. As they walked out of the elevator, Nora's heels tapped quietly across the marble, steady controlled. Ethan's cart squeaked behind him in uneven rhythm, two different cadences somehow moving in the same direction. She slowed, turning toward him. "You handled that man at the restaurant with real grace. You noticed?" he asked, surprised. "I did." Her voice softened. "And I don't forget things like that." For the first time since Harbor and Oak, he let himself hold her gaze, not briefly, not politely, just long enough for something unspoken to pass between them. Something neither of them dared name. He cleared his throat, breaking the tension first. "Well, I should get to work. Floors won't clean themselves. And I should get home," she replied, though the reluctance in her tone was unmistakable. They parted with a quiet nod, but as Nora walked toward the exit, she felt the weight of his pain, his worry, his devotion to that little girl. And she realized the world rarely rewarded men like Ethan. The world chewed them up, stretched them thin, made them fight for scraps. Yet he still showed up. Still carried himself with humility, still managed to laugh softly in an elevator at the end of a long day. She admired him, more than she should. And Ethan, pushing his cart down the empty hallway, felt something he hadn't felt in years. The next evening arrived with the quiet heaviness of a sky about to rain. Hayes Capital's lobby felt larger at night, emptier, cooler, echoing with distant hums of air vents and the squeak of janitorial carts. Ethan walked in with Lila's backpack slung over his shoulder, a knot forming in his chest. His babysitter had canceled last minute. Again. Lila clung to his hand, her little fingers cold from the night air. "Daddy, I can sit quietly. I promise." "I know you can," he whispered, brushing her hair back. "But we're not supposed to bring kids here." He tried to sound calm, but inside his pulse thudded steadily. Rules were rules, and rules rarely bent for men like him. He steered her toward the small staff lounge, a narrow room that smelled of old coffee and disinfectant. The vending machine hummed in one corner. He settled her on the couch with an iPad, setting the volume low. "Stay right here," he said. "Door stays open. You can come get me if you need anything." "Team Cole," she whispered. He touched her hand. "Always." But as he stepped out, a voice cut through the hallway. "Cole, what the hell is this? The building supervisor?" Mr. Hanley strode toward him. Heavy footsteps clipped breath irritation radiating from him. Ethan turned, already bracing. "Hanley. She had nowhere else to go tonight, just for a couple hours." Hanley's voice rose sharp enough to bounce off the marble. "This is a Class A building, not a daycare. You violated protocol." "I didn't have a choice," Ethan said, trying to keep his voice level. "She's staying in the lounge. Quiet, safe. Doesn't matter." Hanley jabbed a finger toward him. "I'm writing this up, and I'll be notifying your contractor. HR, too. This is grounds for disciplinary action." Ethan's stomach dropped. He felt his breath tighten. Not in front of his daughter. Not like this. "Sir, please don't sir me," Hanley snapped. "Your personal problems aren't this building's responsibility." The words landed like blows. Ethan felt humiliation burn under his skin. Then footsteps approached from behind, measured, calm, unmistakably authoritative. "What's going on here, Nora Hayes?" Her voice did not rise. It didn't need to. The calm in it was sharper than Hanley's shouting. Hanley stiffened. "Ms. Hayes, this employee brought a child into the building. Completely unacceptable." She raised a hand. He fell silent instantly. Nora looked at Ethan. First, really looked. His tight jaw. The exhaustion in his eyes. Then she glanced toward the lounge where Lila sat silently, legs tucked under her iPad glowing on her lap. "She's 7, Nora said, voice controlled. "And she's terrified right now." "Please lower your voice." Hanley blinked. Protocol can accommodate compassion," she replied evenly, "especially in emergencies." Her tone carried the certainty of someone used to being obeyed, but the warmth in her expression, soft human, belonged only to her. "Ms. Hayes," Hanley stammered, "with all due respect, this violates, if this building can host hedge funds, mergers, and overnight crisis meetings," she said, each word crisp, "it can handle one scared child for an evening." Hanley's mouth opened, closed, then tightened into a thin line. "I'll adjust the report." "You'll remove it," Nora corrected. He swallowed. "Yes, ma'am." He retreated, steps echoing away. Silence settled over the corridor. Ethan exhaled slowly, like he'd been holding his breath for minutes. His voice was quiet but full. "Thank you. I didn't mean to cause trouble." "You didn't," Nora said. "Life did." The way she said it, gently without judgment, loosened something tight inside him. He glanced at the staff lounge again. "She's a good kid. She doesn't deserve the fallout from all this." "She's lucky to have a father who shows up," Nora murmured, "even when it costs him." He had no words for that. A few minutes later, they walked toward the elevator. Ethan needed to finish his shift. Nora needed to head to another late-night strategy call, but neither moved too quickly, as if walking slower held the moment in place a bit longer. At the elevator doors, Nora hesitated. A rare flicker of uncertainty crossed her face, so subtle he might have missed it if he wasn't watching her so closely. She paused, gathering the right words. "I feel responsible." For what Ethan asked softly. For making your night harder. For stepping in. For complicating things. "You didn't complicate anything," he said. "You helped." Her eyes lifted to his. She inhaled quietly, then said, "Let me take you both to dinner, to thank you for what you did at Harbor and Oak. And because I'd like to." Ethan blinked, stunned. His pulse stuttered. Dinner with her, with Lila. It wasn't just the offer, it was the way she said it. Not as a CEO offering charity, not as someone trying to ease guilt, but as a woman who genuinely wanted their company. "I appreciate it," he said carefully, "but I don't want to put you in a difficult position." "You're not," she said softly. "I'm offering as a person, not as a title." He searched her face for any hint of condescension. Found none. Only sincerity. Still, he hesitated. Not out of pride, out of fear. Fear of people talking. Fear of dragging her into his complicated world. Fear of Lila attaching herself to something that might not last. "I'll think about it," he said finally. Her lips curved, not disappointment but understanding. She gave a small nod. "That's fair." The elevator dinged. She stepped inside. As the doors began to close, she added, "Tell Lila I said hello." Ethan stood in the hallway long after the elevator disappeared. Her voice replayed in his mind. Soft. Warm. Too warm. Later that night, he walked through the apartment door carrying Lila, who had fallen asleep on the bus ride home. Her head rested on his shoulder, her breath slow against his neck. He tucked her into bed, smoothing the blanket over her small frame. Her eyelids fluttered at his touch. "Daddy," she murmured. "I'm here." "Who was the lady?" she whispered sleepily. He smiled. "A friend." "She was nice." "Yes," he said quietly. "She was." After she drifted asleep, he moved to the kitchen table and stared at his phone fingers hovering over the screen. Dinner. With a woman he barely knew. A woman who lived in a world he'd never touch. A woman who'd already changed his night's thoughts and something deeper he hadn't wanted to name. He typed, "We'd like to join you for dinner." He stared at the message for a long moment. His heart thumped once hard. Then he pressed send. A chime echoed in the silent apartment, soft, decisive. And somewhere across the city, Nora Hayes read his message, exhaled slowly, and allowed herself a rare, victorious smile. Ethan stood in front of the mirror in his cramped bedroom, staring at the only button-down shirt he owned that still held its shape. It smelled faintly of detergent and late nights clean, but not new. He smoothed the collar anyway, pressing it between his fingers like it might magically sharpen its creases. His stomach fluttered with the kind of nerves he hadn't felt since he was a teenager. A dinner. Just dinner. Except it wasn't just anything. From the living room came the sound of Leela humming as she packed her drawing into a folder. Crayons clicked against the table. Pages rustled. She burst into his room with excited energy that filled every corner. "Daddy, look, I drew us at the restaurant." She held up a bright picture, 3 small figures at a table, all smiling. Even Nora was drawn with the same soft eyes Lila used when she drew princesses. He smiled despite the knot in his chest. "She'll love it. You think she'll put it on her fridge?" "Maybe," he said, kneeling to zip her jacket. "Or keep it in a special place." Lila's grin widened. "Because she likes you." Ethan froze. She was just being nice. "No," Lila whispered dramatically, "she likes you. Children see truth long before adults dare to." Across the city, Nora Hayes stood in front of her walk-in closet, a space filled with polished armor. Business suits lined the racks like soldiers, structured dresses, blazers sharp enough to cut air. She reached for a navy suit out of habit. Stopped. Something about tonight felt different. Less corporate, more human. "Why are you nervous?" she asked herself. "It's dinner with a single dad and his daughter. That's all." But it wasn't. It was the quiet tug she couldn't ignore. The way he listened. The way he spoke softly to his child. The way he'd looked at her in the elevator, gentle, steady, unafraid of who she was. She chose a simple dress. Soft fabric. Nothing intimidating. She let her hair down instead of pulling it into the usual tight twist. When she lifted her purse, she caught her reflection. The woman looking back at her seemed lighter. Less carved from steel. "Don't overthink this," she murmured. But her heart didn't follow orders. Harbor and Oak looked different tonight. No spilled wine, no arguments, just low jazz murmuring through the speakers and the faint rattle of ice in a shaker. The rain outside tapped a slow, steady rhythm on the windows. Nora arrived first. She picked the same table from their first encounter out of sight, tucked in the corner where conversations felt more intimate. The memory of Ethan kneeling to clean her table flickered in her mind, stirring something warm, something she hadn't let herself feel in decades. When the door opened, she looked up. Ethan walked in with Lila holding his hand. He didn't look like a man used to this kind of place, but he didn't shrink from it either. He stood with quiet dignity, searching for her with uncertain eyes. When their eyes met, Nora's breath softened in her chest. "Hi," she said, standing. Ethan swallowed. "Evening." Lila waved enthusiastically. "Hi, Miss Nora." Nora crouched slightly, smiling. "You can call me Nora tonight." Lila gasped like she'd been granted a royal privilege. They settled into their seats. Plates clinked softly as the waiter poured water, leaving a lemony scent on the air. The conversation began awkwardly, small talk, polite nods, the kind of stiffness that comes from two people pretending they're not aware of the invisible line between them. But Lila dissolved that line quickly. So she asked, leaning forward with childlike boldness, "Are you my dad's boss?" Nora blinked, then laughed, genuine warm surprised. "Technically, I'm the boss of the building. But your dad works for a different company. So you're like, the boss of everybody." Ethan groaned softly. "Lila." Nora shook her head. "It's okay. Honestly, sometimes I think the building is the boss of me." Lila giggled and the tension melted. As the evening unfolded, so did pieces of their lives. Ethan admitted he had no idea what half the menu items meant. Nora gently guided him toward choices without making him feel small. He noticed that her laugh wasn't polished or rehearsed. It was soft, real. She noticed that he always checked to make sure Lila's fork was the right size before handing it to her. One moment in particular lingered. Ethan's voice lowered when he spoke about losing his wife. "She was sick for a long time," he said quietly, thumb tracing the rim of his glass. "Cancer. By the time we realized how bad it was, we were already drowning in hospital bills." He inhaled shakily. "I worked nights, slept at the hospital, woke up to take Lila to daycare. Every day felt like a choice between holding my family together and breaking apart myself." Nora felt her throat tighten. The air around her shifted, not sympathy, not pity, but a deep human resonance she hadn't felt in decades. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "You carried so much." He nodded. "And still do some days." Her hand almost reached across the table, but she clasped it instead, containing the impulse. In return, Ethan asked, "What about you? Ever think about having a family?" Her laugh was small and sad. "I kept thinking I'd have time later," but later turned into 40. Their eyes met, and for a moment they lived in shared honesty. No polish, no roles. Just two people who'd been lonely for far too long. Near the end of dinner, Lila shyly slid the drawing across the table. "I made this for you." Nora took it delicately as if it were made of glass. The crayon lines were uneven, the colors messy. But something about the picture hit her harder than she expected. 3 figures, together, happy. Something warm flooded her chest, nostalgia for a life she'd never lived. "Leela," she whispered, "this is beautiful. Thank you. I'll keep it somewhere very special." Leela beamed with pride. When dinner ended, Ethan called for a rideshare. The night air outside was cool, carrying faint scents of rain and car exhaust. Lila leaned sleepily against his side. "Thank you for tonight," Ethan said. "It meant more than you know." "It meant more than you know, too," Nora replied. He opened his mouth to say something, but the car pulled up, ending the moment. He lifted Lila into the back seat, gave Nora a small wave, then disappeared into the night with the quiet hum of the engine fading down the street. Nora stood under the street lamp, clutching the drawing in her hand. For the first time in years, she didn't want to return to her empty penthouse. She wanted the warmth she'd just tasted. She wanted the laughter she'd heard. She wanted them. And she wasn't ready to let this feeling go. The morning after their dinner at Harbor and Oak felt strangely brighter, like some quiet current had shifted beneath the city. But bright mornings never lasted long inside Hayes' capital. Not when whispers traveled faster than the elevators. It began with a single snapshot taken from behind a lobby plant. Nora Hayes, CEO, in a soft dress, not her usual battle armor, leaning down to speak with a janitor's little girl. Then another photo surfaced of Nora and Ethan stepping out of Harbor and Oak together. By noon, those photos were already circulating through the employees' internal group chats. Ping, ping, ping. Every notification carried another assumption. Is she dating the janitor power imbalance much? Is that why he's always on our floor? Wild if true. The tone wasn't cruel, just gossipy. But gossip in a corporate building had teeth, and ears, and consequences. In her corner office, Nora read a message from HR that made her stomach twist, requesting a brief discussion about professional boundaries. A sterile sentence with a warning baked inside. She straightened her posture, smoothing an invisible wrinkle from her sleeve. The irony was sharp. Yesterday she had felt more human than she had in decades, and today the world was already punishing her for it. When she stepped into HR's glass-walled conference room, the air smelled faintly of lavender cleaner and caution. "Thank you for coming," Ms. Hayes said. Marlene, the HR director, calm voice, measured breath, avoiding eye contact just enough to signal discomfort. "We just wanted to provide guidance." Nora sat. About what Marlene folded her hands. "Your interactions with Mr. Ethan Cole are being noticed, and we're required to remind you of the code of conduct regarding relationships or perceived relationships between leadership and contracted staff." Nora inhaled slowly. Nothing inappropriate happened. "I'm not implying otherwise," Marlene said quickly, "but perception matters, especially at your level." The room felt colder. The hum of the air vent sounded louder, drilling into her composure. Marlene continued, "If you choose to socialize with him, you must be extremely careful. Employees need to feel decisions are fair. A rumor of favoritism can damage trust." Nora nodded politely, even though inside her mind whispered sharply, when did being kind become a liability? She thanked Marlene and left, but each step back to her office echoed with unwelcome truth her world had never allowed softness. Even now, it seemed determined to punish her for wanting something simple, something warm. Meanwhile, Ethan was mopping the 36th floor when Mike approached him with narrowed eyes. "You okay, kid?" the older man asked. "Yeah," Ethan said, but the quiet tremor in his voice betrayed him. Mike lowered his voice. "The building's buzzing. Folks saw you and the CEO together." "I know," Ethan muttered. "It's not great." Mike gave him a sympathetic pat on the shoulder. "People talk when their own lives are boring. Don't let it get to you." But it did get to him. The last thing he wanted was for Nora to get dragged into gossip because of him. And he couldn't bear the thought of Lila hearing whispers at school about her dad and some scandal. He pushed the mop gently across the floor. The faint swish of the wet fibers gave him a rhythm to breathe through. In, out, step, sweep. But when the elevator chimed behind him, his breath caught. Nora stepped out. She didn't wear the guarded CEO mask, not entirely, but she wasn't the woman from dinner either. Something was restrained. Careful. "Good evening," he said quietly, gripping the mop handle. "Hi," she replied, stopping a few feet away, enough distance to look proper. A silence stretched between them, filled with the building's nighttime hum. "I heard about HR," Ethan finally said. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to make things hard for you." "You didn't," she said, but even she knew it wasn't fully true. He swallowed. "People are talking. I just don't want you to get hurt by that." Nora's gaze lifted to him, steady but clouded. "It's not the gossip that bothers me. It's how quickly people assume the worst." He hesitated. "Should we stop talking so much just to keep things easy for you?" The question hit her with more weight than she expected. A pause, a breath, a memory of how he had calmed her simply by sitting nearby, how Lila had handed her that drawing with such innocent trust, how alive she had felt for the first time in years. But reality pulled at her sleeve. "It's not about easy," she said. "It's about consequences." He nodded, slowly, shoulders tensing. "I get that." His tone was polite, respectful, but she heard the hurt woven through it like a thin crack in glass. She stepped closer, not enough to break protocol, but enough for him to hear the softness in her voice. "If I'm making your life harder, tell me," she said. "I don't want to be the reason anyone judges you or Lila." He shook his head firmly. "You're not the problem. The problem is that people can't imagine a world where someone like you and someone like me could even talk without assuming something shady." His honesty disarmed her. He had no filter, just truth. It felt like fresh air. Then he added, voice low but steady, "I just don't want to be the story people tell at your expense. Or at my daughter's." Those words sank deep into her chest, into the fragile place she tried to ignore. For a moment, neither spoke. The hallway's soft lights hummed overhead. Somewhere in the distance, a vacuum cleaner droned like background music. Nora looked at him. Truly looked the exhaustion, the earnestness, the quiet dignity. And she realized something terrifying. She didn't want to step back. She didn't want to let the world scare her away from this connection, this rare, unmistakably human spark. Something inside her whispered, "You're already in too deep." She forced herself to nod. "I understand." He nodded back. But his eyes told the real truth. They were both lying. Neither of them wanted distance. Neither of them wanted to retreat to the safe, empty corners of their lives. Yet both knew that the lines between them, corporate, social, ethical, were beginning to blur like wet ink smudging across a floor they could no longer keep perfectly clean. When Nora reached her car that night, she sat with her hands still on the steering wheel, heart thumping softly in the quiet interior. She whispered into the stillness, "This is dangerous, but I don't want it to end." Upstairs, Ethan wrung out his mop, listening to the water drip steady rhythmic like a countdown he couldn't control. He whispered, too barely audible, "I don't want to step back." Both of them felt it. A shift, a small crack, something beginning to crumble and something else beginning to grow. Night settled over Hayes Capital with a hush that belonged only to empty office floors. The daytime world had emptied out keyboards, silenced meetings, adjourned coffee cups abandoned. The air felt cooler at night, carrying the faint scent of disinfectant printer ink and the soft thump of distant vacuum cleaners. Ethan pushed his janitorial cart down the 17th floor hallway, humming quietly under his breath to keep himself awake. It had been a long day, school emails, extra shifts, and the gnawing worry of what people whispered behind his back after the dinner with Nora. But tonight something broke the usual rhythm. Raised voices, sharp, dismissive, cutting through the hallway like a blade. Ethan paused, gripping the mop handle. Around the corner, he saw a middle-aged cleaning staff member, Mr. Harris, a kind man with decades of work behind him, standing stiffly while a mid-level manager berated him. "I said this floor was supposed to be spotless. By 6, the manager snapped, tapping his shiny shoes impatiently. "Are you losing track of time now?" Mr. Harris stammered. "Sir, I wasn't assigned this floor yesterday. I don't care about your excuses. I'll file a complaint with your contractor. Maybe they'll replace you with someone younger who can keep up." The cruelty hit Ethan like a cold slap. Before he could stop himself, he stepped forward. He wasn't on this floor last night. The manager whipped around. "Excuse me." "He's right," Ethan said firmly. "You're punishing the wrong person." Mr. Harris looked down, embarrassed. The manager's face darkened. "You janitors think you know everything," he barked. "Maybe I should escalate this." Ethan straightened, then escalated with the truth. Silence crackled through the air. The manager opened his mouth to retort, but another voice cut through the tension, calm, controlled, cold enough to stop the temperature in the hallway. "What's going on here, Nora?" She approached with steady steps, her heels tapping a quiet warning against the floor. Her eyes swept the scene. Harris trembling, Ethan standing a little too rigid, and the manager looking like he'd swallowed a lemon. The manager cleared his throat. "Ms. Hayes, I was just addressing performance issues with the janitorial staff." Nora crossed her arms. "Is that so? Because from what I've heard in the last 15 seconds, it sounds more like intimidation." The manager stiffened. "Ma'am, with all due respect." "If you're about to tell me how to run my building," she said coolly, "choose your next words wisely." The man's face drained of color. Nora turned to Mr. Harris. "You're not in trouble. You're going home. Right now. Please get some rest." He nodded, grateful eyes glistening. Then her gaze shifted to Ethan. For a second, the air softened between them, an unspoken question, a quiet "thank you," but professionalism returned like a shutter closing. "Mr. Cole, thank you for speaking up. I'll follow up with HR." Her voice was calm but decisive. The manager muttered something unintelligible and fled to the elevator. When they were alone, Ethan let out a slow breath. "You didn't have to do that." "Yes," Nora said softly, "I did." Hours later, the building lay silent. Only one office glowed faintly on the top floor. Nora's. Ethan reached her floor near the end of his shift, pushing his cart quietly. He expected the office to be empty. Instead, he saw her through the glass wall, sitting motionless on the couch, laptop still open on the table, unread emails glowing like harsh little warnings. Papers lay scattered. A half-drunk cup of coffee sat untouched. And her breathing. Her breathing was too fast. He recognized the signs immediately. Panic, pressure, someone drowning without making a sound. He hesitated at the doorway. Ms. Hayes. She didn't answer. He stepped inside, careful not to startle her. Nora, her head lifted slowly like it weighed more than she could manage. "I'm fine," she whispered, but she wasn't. Her eyes were glassy. Her shoulders trembled ever so slightly. Her breath came in uneven bursts, shallow and strained. He kept a respectful distance, 2 or 3 feet away, enough to give her space, but close enough that she felt she wasn't alone. "You're having a panic spiral," he said gently. "It's okay." She pressed her palms into her eyes. "It's not. I shouldn't be like this." "You're human," he said. "That's allowed." For a minute, the room held only the hum of the building's nighttime system's air vents whirring, a faint buzz from the overhead lights, Ethan's calm breathing guiding her own. She swallowed hard. "The board wants cuts. Investors want blood. There's a journalist digging up my past. And all I want is—" She stopped abruptly as if the truth was too dangerous to release. Ethan knew better than to push. Instead, he eased himself onto the far end of the sofa, leaving space between them, grounding the room with his presence, not his touch. "When my wife was sick," he said quietly, staring ahead, not at her, "I lived in fight or flight for months. Every day felt like waking up in a storm. The world didn't slow down. It didn't care." Her breathing slowed, syncing unconsciously with the cadence of his voice. "The only thing that helped," he continued, "was knowing I wasn't alone. Even if the person beside me couldn't fix anything. Just having someone there." His words were simple, honest, not polished like the board's speeches, not scripted like financial briefings. Real. Nora lowered her hands. Her eyes were tired, rimmed with stress, but clearer now. "You don't have to sit here with me." "I know," he said softly. "But I'm here anyway." For a long moment, neither moved. The silence between them shifted, warming, deepening, becoming less empty and more shared. Finally, Ethan let out a small breath. "You don't have to be steel all the time. Not in front of a janitor who's seen worse floors." Her laugh came unexpectedly wet, breathy but real. A crack of light in heavy clouds. She wiped the corner of her eye. "That's the first time I've laughed all week. Glad I could help," he murmured. Later that night, when Ethan left the office, Nora remained on the sofa, sitting upright again, breathing steady. But something inside her had changed. She touched her chest lightly, feeling the faint echo of warmth he'd left behind. Why him? Why now? She didn't have the answers. But she felt the crack in her armor, the first in years, and she didn't hate it. Downstairs, pushing his cart toward the elevator, Ethan exhaled slowly. Something in him was shifting, too. Something tender, unfamiliar. He whispered to himself, "Careful. You're getting in deeper." But neither of them pulled back. Not anymore. The next morning began like any other for Ethan. Sunlight slipping through thin curtains, the faint whistle of the kettle, the quiet creak of floorboards under tired feet. But the normalcy shattered the moment he opened the mailbox downstairs. A thick envelope, stamped, official, the kind of paper that made his stomach sink before he even read it. He tore it open, breath stalling. Petition for review of legal custody, filed by Margaret and Thomas Whitfield, Lila's maternal grandparents. Ethan gripped the paper as if it might vanish if he held it tight enough. But the words stayed cold and unforgiving. They claimed he lacked stability. They cited his double shifts. They referenced nights he brought Lila to work when childcare fell through. They argued she needed a more structured environment. The worst part, their lawyer attached screenshots from an online blog speculating about Ethan's connection to a high-profile CEO. A rumor, now twisted into ammunition. His chest tightened, breath shuddering. He leaned against the apartment hallway wall, fighting the rising wave of fear. They can't take her. They can't. She's all I have. Across the city, Hayes Capital buzzed with corporate energy. Phones rang, heels clicked. But beneath the surface, tension simmered like static. Another article had dropped. This one wasn't gossip. It was a cleverly framed piece on a financial blog linking Nora Hayes to a romantic entanglement with a janitor, suggesting she exercised questionable judgment in her personal life. It didn't explicitly accuse her of misconduct. But the insinuations were sharp enough to cut credibility. Nora read the headline in her office. The words blurred for a moment. Inside her chest, something heavy settled equal parts anger and dread. A knock sounded. The general counsel, Miss Beckett, stepped in with a folder under her arm. "We need to discuss this," she said gently. Nora gestured for her to sit, keeping her voice steady. "Go ahead." Beckett sighed. "The board is concerned. They don't want this painted as a misuse of power or favoritism toward a contracted employee." Nora clenched her jaw. "There is no favoritism." "I believe you," Beckett said. "But public perception doesn't care about truth, only about noise." Nora stared out the window, watching the distant ferry cut across the gray water. That familiar pressure returned like something inside her tightening, threatening to snap. "This is absurd," she whispered. "Absurd." Beckett agreed softly, but real. That afternoon, Ethan walked, almost stumbled into a small cafe Nora sometimes used for private meetings. The door jingled softly as he entered, eyes shadowed with exhaustion. She was already there at a corner table. No makeup hair pulled back, wearing a simple sweater instead of her usual power suit. Something about her looked bruised emotionally, but her eyes softened instantly when she saw him. "Ethan," she breathed, standing. He sat across from her, hands trembling. She noticed immediately. "What happened?" she asked, voice low, steady, anchoring. He slid the papers across the table. She skimmed the first page and froze. "Oh my God, it's real," he said, voice cracking. "They want custody. Now they think I'm dragging Lila into some scandal because of the news article about us." His breath hitched. "I can't lose her, Nora. She's my life." She felt it, his desperation, the raw fear only a parent could understand. A deep ache formed in her chest. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. "This shouldn't be happening. Not because of me. Not because of lies." Ethan shook his head. "You didn't cause this. Life did. But the truth is—" He paused, swallowing hard. "Being close to you makes everything riskier. For both of us." The words were gentle, but they cut deep. Nora inhaled sharply. A quiet, fractured breath. "That's not fair," she murmured. "I know," he said. "But it's reality." For a long moment, silence held the table between them. The cafe buzzed softly, milk steaming silverware clinking a distant laugh, but their world felt sealed in a painful bubble. "Is there anything I can do?" she asked finally. "I don't know," he whispered. "But I'm scared. Truly scared." She folded her hands, grounding herself. Then she said something she'd never said to anyone, not a board member, not a lawyer, not even her therapist. "I don't want to step away from you." His breath caught. "But," she continued, "I also can't be the reason you lose your daughter." He blinked, eyes glassy. His hands tightened into fists. "So, what do we do?" She looked down at the table. The wood grain blurred as her eyes burned. "I don't know." The admission felt like surrender and honesty. Then she lifted her gaze, voice barely above a whisper. "This world isn't built to let people like us choose each other." Ethan's throat tightened. "But I want to. Me too." They stared at each other, two worlds colliding, two hearts caught in a storm neither had asked for. When they stepped outside, the afternoon sky was dull, washed in gray. Cars rolled by. Wind brushed through their clothes, a city buzzing with life while theirs crumbled around them. Nora reached out carefully without touching him, but close enough that he felt her warmth. "Whatever happens," she said softly, "you're a good father. No article can change that." He shook his head. "But a judge might." The fear in his voice cracked her heart. A long silence stretched between them before Nora forced herself to speak the words she dreaded most. "I may be hurting your case more than helping it." His chest rose with a deep, painful breath. "I know." Their eyes locked, raw, vulnerable, afraid. He wasn't angry at her. She wasn't guilty for wanting him. But fate had given them a brutal crossroads. A tear escaped down Nora's cheek before she could stop it. Ethan's breath trembled at the sight. "Ethan," she whispered, but no solution came. No miracle. No way to rewrite the rules of their world. He finally said, voice breaking, "I need time to think, to figure out what's right for her." She nodded, choking back another tear. "Of course." Then he turned and walked away slowly, heavily each step, feeling like a peeling away of something fragile they had barely begun to build. Nora stood frozen on the sidewalk, hands trembling, breath shaking in the cold air. A single question echoed in both their hearts. Is love worth it when the cost is everything? The week after the custody papers arrived unfolded like a slow-motion collapse, quiet, suffocating, inevitable. Ethan felt every hour in his bones, every minute in his chest. Sleep became something he chased but never caught. Even coffee tasted dull, bitter, powerless against the weight pressing down on him. He didn't avoid Nora, but he didn't seek her out either. Distance wasn't a punishment. It was protection, so he told himself. Protection for Lila. Protection for Nora. Protection from the world that misunderstood everything between them. But it didn't feel like protection. It felt like losing something he hadn't even gotten to hold. On his final night at Hayes Capital, the choice he'd made just hours earlier, Ethan stepped into the silent top floor carrying a cardboard box for his supplies. The hallway lights flickered softly, the building settling into its nighttime rhythm. He paused by Nora's office. Her door was closed. The light inside was off. Yet her presence still lingered like the echo of a breath, the faint warmth of a laugh only she could coax out of him. His gaze drifted to her desk, the sofa where she had nearly fallen apart the week before, the spot on the carpet where they'd stood far too close. His chest tightened. He began his last cleanup, slowly, carefully wiping surfaces, emptying trash, aligning chairs. His movements were methodical, reverent almost, like he was tending to something sacred. When he picked up her favorite mug, cream-colored chipped at the handle, his thumb brushed the place where her fingers always rested. A soft exhale left him. Then he saw it, tucked beside the mug. The drawing, Lila's drawing. 3 figures holding hands. Nora had kept it on her desk all week, his throat closed. He set the mug down gently as if afraid any loud sound would shatter what remained of his composure. His heartbeat thudded in the emptiness. He was walking away from something that mattered. But wasn't that what good fathers did? Didn't they choose their children over themselves every time? He blinked hard and returned to his cart. A few minutes later, he placed the termination request on the building supervisor's desk. Request to transfer. Terminate assignment. Effective immediately. He signed it with a hand that shook more than he'd expected. He didn't hear the elevator until it opened behind him. Nora stepped into the hallway. She wasn't dressed like a CEO this time, not the version the world knew. She wore jeans, a soft sweater, hair loose around her shoulders. But her eyes, sharp, darkened by worry, held more authority than any tailored suit she owned. "Ethan," she whispered. He froze, turned slowly. Her gaze dropped to the paper on the desk. She picked it up, hands trembling slightly. "You're leaving," she breathed disbelief, cracking her voice. Just like that, he swallowed hard. "It's for Lila. If staying away from you means protecting her case, then that's what I have to do." Nora stepped closer. "You think that's what I want? You think I want you disappearing from this building?" She stopped herself before she crossed a line. Words couldn't uncross. Ethan kept his eyes down. "I can't risk giving her grandparents more ammunition. They already think I'm unstable, irresponsible, And now they're dragging you into it. You didn't drag me into anything, she said, voice fierce. The world did. He shook his head. Doesn't matter. Judges don't care about nuance. They care about optics. And right now, you and I, he let out a bitter laugh, we're terrible optics. Silence cracked between them, thick and heavy. Finally, Nora spoke softly, so softly it almost broke him, I thought. After everything. You might fight for us. He inhaled sharply. I'd fight for you in a heartbeat, but I have to fight for her first. I'm not asking you to choose me over your daughter. Her voice wavered. I'd never ask that. I'm asking you not to let fear make the choice for you. He lifted his gaze to meet hers, and the torment in his eyes hit her like a physical blow. This isn't fear, he whispered. This is reality. Her breath hitched. So that's it. You walk away. He looked at her, then fully painfully. No. I break my own heart so I don't lose hers. Tears filled Nora's eyes but didn't fall. She held herself rigid, proud, hurting. You don't get to decide everything alone, she said, voice cracking. Not when I'm the one paying the price, too. He stepped back as if distance might make this easier. I'm sorry. She laughed one sharp, broken sound. Sorry doesn't fix anything. But then she caught his expression, raw, devastated, terrified, and she softened. She took a step closer. Ethan, listen to me. He waited. I spent my whole life choosing work over people, and it cost me more than I can explain. Don't choose fear over love. Don't repeat my mistakes. Her voice trembled with truth, with memory, with pain she rarely let anyone see. He let the words sink in, but they didn't loosen the chains of responsibility around his heart. I can't gamble with her future, he said quietly, not even for something that feels. He swallowed. Feels like this. She blinked away a tear. Feels like what his voice was barely a breath. Hope? The single word hung between them, glowing and breaking at the same time. Before either of them could speak again, a notification flashed on Nora's phone. She glanced at the screen. A new article. This one worse. Sharper. Almost an accusation. Her blood ran cold. What is it? Ethan asked. She didn't answer. She just turned the phone toward him. A headline glared back. Sources suggest improper conduct between Hayes Capital CEO and contracted night staff. His stomach dropped. Her voice came out hollow. The board wants me to sign an ethics agreement. To confirm, I've had no personal involvement with you? He froze. They want you to deny, they want me to erase you, she said quietly. Silence swallowed the room whole. Ethan closed his eyes, pain radiating through him. I'm sorry, he whispered again. And Nora, who had survived betrayal, corporate warfare, and the loneliness of success, felt something inside her crack. Not a small fracture. A break. The chapter closed, not with words, but with the near-silent sound of two hearts pulling apart. Ethan turned away first. Not because he wanted to, but because he had to. Nora watched him go, her breath shallow, her chest aching. For the first time in years, she wondered if strength didn't mean standing firm, but choosing when to fight. And when the elevator doors closed behind Ethan, she made a choice. She wasn't done fighting. Not for her reputation, not for her title, not even for love, but for what was right. For the first time in too long, Nora Hayes felt the burn of purpose ignite in her chest. The fall had begun, but so had the fight. The courthouse didn't sound anything like the movies. No dramatic gavel echo, no shouting lawyers, just the scrape of chairs on old linoleum, the shuffle of papers, the murmur of strained voices trying to sound calm when they were anything but. Ethan sat at the small wooden table, palms damp against his knees. The fabric of his only decent jacket scratched against his neck. Behind him, he could hear the soft rustle of Lila's grandparents speaking in low, sure tones to their attorney. He tried not to listen. He tried to breathe. In, out, for her. Always for her. The door at the back opened with a quiet creak. A bailiff's voice, steady practiced, cut through the room. "All rise." Everyone stood. The judge entered, footsteps, measured robe whispering against the floor. The room settled with a dry, heavy silence. "Be seated," the judge said. The sound of everyone sitting at once rippled through the room. Ethan felt the chair catch him as if his legs couldn't be trusted. The judge glanced at the file. "We're here today to consider a petition for review of custody regarding minor child Lila Whitfield Cole." Even hearing her full name in this room made his chest clench. The grandparents' attorney started first. His voice was smooth, almost kind on the surface, but his words came edged. "Your Honor, my clients are deeply concerned. Mr. Cole works 2 jobs. He leaves the child in the care of others for long stretches. There are documented instances of him bringing her to a night shift building. This is not stability. This is strain." Ethan's lawyer, a tired, capable woman with a worn leather briefcase, leaned toward him. "Just breathe. We'll answer point by point." The other attorney kept going. "We also submit into evidence a series of online articles tying Mr. Cole to a high-profile CEO, raising questions about the environment surrounding the child, a media circus potential instability, blurred boundaries of power and propriety." He slid printed pages across the table. Ethan caught a glimpse of a headline. His stomach dropped. Again. The judge scanned the documents with a neutral face. "Mr. Cole," the judge said, "at last you'll have a chance to respond. For now, I'll hear your counsel." His attorney stood. Her chair scraped softly. "Your Honor, my client is a working-class single father in a country where working 2 jobs is not a crime. It's survival." Her voice was even respectful, but firm. He has held steady employment, paid his rent on time, maintained health insurance for his daughter, and every teacher report confirms Lila is loved, nurtured, and emotionally attached to her father as her primary caregiver. She paused. "Yes, he brought her to his workplace on a few emergency occasions. We're not denying that. But those choices were made so she wouldn't be left alone or with unsafe individuals. He chose proximity and safety over convenience." She lifted one of the printed articles, glanced at it, then let it drop onto the table with a faint thud. "As for this, we will present testimony to clarify. It is built on speculation, not fact." The judge nodded. "Very well. Call your first witness." She turned to Ethan. "It's time." His footsteps sounded too loud as he walked to the stand. The oath felt strange in his mouth, the words thick, but he said them clearly. He owed Lila that. His lawyer guided him gently. "Mr. Cole, can you describe your daily routine with your daughter?" He talked about breakfast, about smiley-face pancakes, about the way she tapped the table with her heels when she was excited, about the Team Cole ritual palms pressed, whispered, "Always." As he spoke, the fear in his chest loosened just a little. The sound of his own voice, steady and honest, kept him anchored. He described homework at the kitchen table, late-night story times when he could make it home before she slept Saturday mornings at the park. He didn't try to sound perfect. He told the truth. "Do you love your daughter?" his lawyer asked finally. The question was almost insulting in its simplicity. "With everything I am," he said. His voice cracked on the last word. He let it. The grandparents' attorney pressed him with quiet, pointed questions. "Is it true you work overnight shifts?" "Yes." "Is it true you sometimes don't see your daughter awake on certain weekdays?" He swallowed. "Sometimes, yes." "Is it true you brought her into an office building past normal hours?" "Yes, when childcare fell through. I stayed nearby. She was never unattended." "And is it also true," the attorney said, sliding a page closer to the judge, "that you were the subject of an article speculating about an improper relationship with your night shift building's CEO?" A murmur ran through the room. Ethan felt heat climb his neck. The article was exaggeration. There was nothing improper. "But you do know Ms. Hayes personally," he hesitated. Yes. How his mind flashed with images. Harbor and Oak elevator rides, quiet conversations on worn office couches. She's someone who showed me kindness, he said, and someone who saw my daughter as more than an inconvenience. The attorney smiled without warmth, no further questions. Hours later, when the judge allowed for a brief recess, the air in the hallway felt thick. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead like anxious insects. That was when she appeared. He didn't hear her approach at first, just the soft click of heels on tile, a sound he knew too well from another building, another life. "Nora," he whispered. She stood there in a simple dark suit, no jewelry except for a watch. No entourage, no dramatics. Her eyes met his steady, determined bracing. "Your lawyer called me," she said quietly. "They asked if I'd be willing to testify." "Did you agree?" he asked, breath shallow. "Yes, your counsel will hate that. They already do." There was a flicker of wry humor in her voice. It vanished quickly. "Doesn't matter. This is bigger than my PR." He felt a surge of something that wasn't quite relief, wasn't quite dread. "You don't have to do this." "I know," she said. "I want to." Back in the courtroom, the air seemed tighter when Nora took the stand. The grandparents' attorney watched her like a hawk. The judge's gaze sharpened with interest. She placed her hand on the Bible, repeated the oath in a calm, even tone. "Please state your name and occupation," Ethan's lawyer said. "Nora Elaine Hayes. I'm the CEO of Hayes Capital." A rustle. Recognition. Wait. Ms. Hayes, the lawyer, continued. "How do you know Mr. Cole? I first met him at a restaurant where he was working a second job. He handled an uncomfortable situation with more grace than anyone else there. Later, I realized he also worked nights in the office building where my company leases space." "Did you develop any personal knowledge of his parenting?" "Yes," she said, indirectly at first. "I overheard him talking to his daughter on the phone, thoughtful patient, apologizing for missing bedtime while promising pancakes in the morning. Later, I met his daughter. She was polite, affectionate, clearly attached to him. She gave me a drawing of them together." Her voice softened for half a second. She drew me into it, too. "Have you ever given Mr. Cole preferential treatment in any official capacity?" "No," Nora said firmly. "I don't manage his employment. He's contracted through a facilities company. I've never influenced his assignments, pay, or scheduling. Did you ever use your power to shield him from accountability?" "No. I intervened once when a building supervisor was verbally abusive toward janitorial staff. Not to protect Ethan personally, but to enforce basic respect. And did you ever engage in any inappropriate relationship with Mr. Cole?" Her answer came without the slightest hesitation. "No." She let the word sit in the quiet, solid, unshaken. "What is your opinion of him as a father?" her lawyer asked. Nora exhaled slowly. "He is exactly the kind of father this world needs more of. Exhausted, yes. Overworked, yes. But fiercely devoted. Everything in his life bends around that little girl. I have seen powerful men abandon their families for far less pressure than what he lives under every day. He stays. He shows up, even when it costs him." The courtroom was silent. Even the judge's pen paused above the page. The grandparents' attorney tried to rattle her on cross-examination, pressing about optics, about power, about rumors. She didn't flinch. "When people ask about this situation," she said calmly, "I tell them the truth that the real story here isn't a CEO and a janitor. It's a child with a father who refuses to stop fighting for her." Later that week, in a different high-ceilinged room with better furniture and worse humanity, Nora sat before the Hayes Capital Board. Papers rustled. Throats cleared. The general counsel's voice summarized again the risk factors of her testimony and media coverage. "You chose to involve yourself," Daniel said, his tone measured. "Against legal advice." "I did," Nora replied. "That's problematic." "What's truly problematic," she said slowly, feeling her pulse steady as she spoke, is a company that expects its leaders to ignore injustice to avoid bad headlines. A murmur, she continued, I will sign a clear, transparent conduct policy. I will support boundaries that protect every worker from senior executives to night staff. But I will not pretend a human being is disposable because he cleans our floors. One of the older board members cleared his throat. Our concern is not your compassion, Ms. Hayes. It's the precedent. Nora met his eyes. Then let the precedent be this, that leadership and decency are not mutually exclusive. Silence. It wasn't a triumphant movie moment. No standing ovation, no dramatic vote. Just a long pause. And then an almost reluctant nod from Daniel. The board is not seeking your resignation at this time, he said. But we will expect formal policy proposals on boundaries with contractors and frontline staff, and we will watch closely. Good, she answered. So will I. A few days later, Ethan got the call. His lawyer's voice came through the cheap plastic of his phone, the line crackling slightly. The judge has ruled. You retain primary custody, she said, with an emphasis on maintaining stable employment and predictable hours. The grandparents get structured visitation. He closed his eyes. His whole body sagged with relief. Thank you, he whispered, voice breaking. Thank you. Oh, and one more thing, she added. Your facilities company received a recommendation from the building ownership. They're offering you a more stable role. Day shift, facilities coordinator, better pay, more time with your daughter. He pressed his hand over his mouth shoulders, shaking. Are you still there? She asked. Yeah, he managed. I'm here. When he hung up, he grabbed Lila, lifting her into his arms. She squealed. What happened, Daddy? He laughed through tears. We did it, kiddo. You're staying with me. Officially. No more. Maybe. She wrapped her arms around his neck, squeezing tight. Team Cole. He pressed his forehead to hers. Always. That night, as the city hummed under a softer sky, Nora stared at her phone. The glow lit her face in the quiet of her apartment. She typed a short message, deleted it, typed another. Then, finally, she wrote, I heard about the ruling. I'm glad the court saw who you really are. N. She hovered over the send button, heart pounding. Then she pressed it. Across town, Ethan's phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. He glanced at the screen, breath catching when he saw her name. He read the message once, twice. His fingers hovered over the screen. He began to type. The next choice, the one that would shape not just their lives but the way they chose to stand in the light together, waited in that quiet space, between received and replying. Spring crept into the city, slowly, longer daylight, softer breezes, the faint smell of wet pavement warming under afternoon sun. For the first time in years, Nora Hayes felt the seasons changing inside her too. 3 months had passed since the custody ruling and the board confrontation. 3 months of quiet rebuilding. 3 months of learning to breathe in a world that no longer demanded she be still every hour of the day. Hayes Capital had rolled out its new frontline support program, fairer policies for cleaning staff, security teams, reception workers. The board didn't praise her publicly, but they didn't stand in her way either. And for once, that was enough. She worked fewer late nights. She paused more often. She even learned to leave the building before sunset sometimes with her heart unexpectedly light. Across the city, Ethan's life had shifted too. The new role, facilities coordinator, brought stable hours, steady pay, and something he didn't know, he'd been starved of evenings with his daughter. He walked her to school most mornings now, picked her up some afternoons, helped with homework at the kitchen table instead of by video call during a break between shifts. The tension in his shoulders softened. The dark circles under his eyes faded. The constant fear humming beneath his skin began to quiet. But there was something else, an ache he hadn't addressed. A quiet space beside him that felt emptier at night. Nora. They hadn't seen each other in person since the hearing. Messages were brief, polite, careful, just enough to reassure the other one was okay. but not enough to bridge the distance life had forced between them. Until one Friday morning when Ethan's phone buzzed during breakfast. Lila was stirring her cereal. He checked the screen casually, then froze. A message. From her. Harbor and Oak. Friday night. Same table. This time, no business, no crises, no armor. Just us. He stared at the phone long enough for Lila to notice. "Daddy, what's wrong? You look like you swallowed your spoon," he exhaled in a stunned laugh. "I just got invited to dinner." By who? He hesitated. Nora. Lila's eyes lit instantly. Like Nora. Nora? He nodded. "Daddy," she whispered dramatically, "you have to go. You like her." He cleared his throat awkwardly. "She's someone I respect. That's grown up for like." Lila hopped off her chair. "Can I go too?" He smiled warmly. "I think this one's just for the adults tonight." She stuck out her lower lip, then brightened. "Then wear the blue shirt. It makes you look like a superhero who works in an office." He laughed again. Okay. Blue shirt." But as he walked her to school that morning, a single thought pulsed through him. Maybe this time. We won't have to choose between fear and love. Friday night carried the same gentle rain as the evening they first met. The same jazz drifted softly from Harbor and Oak. The same warm clinking of plates and low hum of conversations. But something in the air felt changed, healed, softer. Nora arrived early. She stood by their old table, the corner booth where everything had started running her fingertips along the wooden edge. Her heart fluttered in a way she didn't fight anymore. The door opened. She looked up, and there he was. Ethan stepped inside, wearing the blue shirt, hair slightly damp from the rain, eyes searching until they found hers and softened. He walked toward her slowly, as though approaching something fragile and precious. "Nora," he said quietly. "Ethan," she breathed. No titles, no walls, just names. They sat. The waiter poured water, left them alone. For the first few seconds, neither spoke. The silence was comfortable, full, not empty. Nora broke it first. "How are you?" Her voice carried warmth, steady but sincere. "Better," he said. "A lot better. And Lila thriving. Happy. Sleeping on schedule for the first time in her life." He smiled. "She still asks about you." Nora's expression softened. "I think about her a lot. And you." His breath hitched a little. "I wasn't sure if I should reach out more. I didn't want to reopen anything painful." "You didn't reopen anything," she said gently. "You're part of why I'm standing stronger." He looked down, moved by something he wasn't sure he deserved. "And you?" he asked quietly. "How are things at the board?" She shrugged lightly. "Surprisingly stable. They didn't fire me." A faint smile. "Mostly because I stopped being afraid of them." "That sounds like you." She shook her head. "It didn't once. But it does now." They spoke for a while about small things, real things. Her childhood summers, his love of fixing things, Lila's new obsession with astronomy, books they used to read, dreams they'd forgotten they had. It wasn't dramatic, it wasn't cinematic, it was human. And then, somewhere between the main course and dessert menus, Ethan reached into his pocket. "I, brought something. Kinda silly." He unfolded a creased piece of paper, a small handwritten plan. "New schedule," he said sheepishly. "Day shift, nights free, college savings goals, weekly pancake routine." He hesitated, and one more line at the bottom. Nora slid the paper closer and read aloud. "I want the chance to love without running." Her breath trembled. He added softly, "I don't know how to do this. I mess up. I overthink. I worry too much. But if there's any chance, any at all, I want to learn." She reached across the table, placing her hand over his, not tentative, not uncertain, but steady. "I don't know how to do this either," she whispered. but I'd like to learn. With you." He closed his eyes, relief washing through him like warmth. "We'll figure it out," he murmured. One night, one rent payment, one science project at a time. A bubble of laughter escaped her gentle, honest healing, and right then the waiter set down a small dish of warm chocolate mousse in front of them. Layla wasn't there, but her spirit might as well have been. Nora smiled. "Should we?" A small voice echoed in both their memories. "Can we figure out dessert first?" They laughed together, full-bodied this time. As their spoons clinked softly against the dish, the jazz swelled. The lights dimmed. The world shrank down to two people who had endured storms bigger than themselves and had chosen finally to step into the light. No fireworks. No grand declarations. Just a quiet, steady kind of love, the kind people build real lives on. And, as the music rose, a final voiceover whispered through the moment. Class divides don't vanish. Power doesn't magically equalize. But when two people choose kindness, accountability, and love in the open, love doesn't need a fairy tale. It just needs room to stay and time to grow. Outro inspiring message. A Saulas call to action. TTS optimized. Sometimes the most powerful love stories aren't the ones built on perfection, but the ones built on courage. Courage to show up when the world misunderstands you. Courage to hold on when life pulls you in every direction. Courage to choose kindness even when it costs you something. And maybe, courage to open your heart again even after years of protecting it. If tonight's story touched something in you, if you've ever witnessed a love like this, or lived through a moment where kindness changed everything, I'd love for you to share your story in the comments. Your experience might be exactly the message someone else needs to hear today. And while you're here, tell me, where are you watching from? I always love seeing our community stretch from city to city, country to country, all listening together. If you enjoyed this story, if it brought you comfort, hope, or just a moment of peace, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps these stories reach more people who need a little light in their lives. Thank you truly for spending your time with this story tonight. Thank you for listening, for feeling, and for being part of this growing family of storytellers. Until the next chapter, take care of your heart, be gentle with yourself, and remember, love doesn't have to be perfect to be worth choosing.